Hello plant lovers, Matthew in Melbourne here, welcoming you back to my channel, and thank you for finding me if this is your first time. I post every week and it is about growing cold, cool and intermediate orchids here in Melbourne in Australia without any extra help, let's just say, from greenhouses or humidifiers or grow lights, etc. So if that is of any interest to you, I am a complete amateur though, do hit subscribe. And I was actually reminded why I started this channel today, because one of the Facebook groups in Australia I belong to, orchid groups, someone had posted questions about some of those baby orchids in plastic slips that you buy from hardware stores. And I thought, I remember it is so hard to find information about what can grow for you in your area and then how to look after them. So this is why I gave birth to a channel, to really document my journey of trying to figure out what I could grow here in Melbourne with our particular climate, which has cold, wet winters that don't freeze and hot, dryish summers that can also be a bit wet and cold, and with a fairly reasonable average humidity both in summer and in winter. So okay conditions, but as long as you understand them, you can figure out what to grow. But plant lovers, enough of that. Let us get to today's orchid in question. And this is, and there's a story about what this is. It is a Colmanara and it is Wildcat Black Cat. Now, here is the story with this orchid. Firstly, it is yet another of one of my COVID rescues. I bought it before who knows which lockdown, because we are now in our 6th lockdown in Melbourne that has just been extended. So anyway, I bought this before one of the many when my favorite nursery had to close. They obviously had to sell some things, and this plant wasn't looking great, and it had a dead flower spike with no trace of the color of the flower. So I really had no idea, but looking at it, you can assume it's sort of an Oncidium alliance, like a Star Wars alliance. You could kind of tell from the pseudobulbs. It was going to be that type of orchid, but I had no idea. Anyway, plant lovers, look. I am so excited. This spike emerged whenever a couple of months ago. It is midwinter now. Well, it's not actually, it's late winter, and the flowers have just about finished open. There's a few more here, and it is the most sensational color. So I thought today we'll do 2 things, maybe 3, who knows, let's not count. Firstly, basic care for this. Secondly, how do you go about IDing an orchid like this that you rescue? And the last thing is, I'm almost embarrassed to tell you, but I was literally just setting up to make this video and this arrived. They are, plant lovers, orchids, and I have no recollection of ordering them or what's in this box. So we might do a mini subterfuge unboxing later on. But anyway, let's talk to this. All right, so the first thing is, let's assume we know the name, and we do, because it is Colmanara Wildcat Black Cat. Now, this is one of those intergeneric orchids, and it is a mix of Miltonia, Odontoglossum, Oncidium, and it was created in 1936 by a man called Jeremiah Coleman, hence the name Colmanara. But alas, to the everlasting memory of Jeremiah Coleman, they have been reclassified now as Oncostele, which doesn't have quite the same ring, and I kind of feel for Mr. Coleman, so for me, it is a Colmanara. As you can perhaps imagine, given its parentage, although Miltonia always makes me a little nervous because that is a Brazilian, warmer, more humid loving orchid, and I ain't got those conditions, ladies and gentlemen. But anyway, generally with these kind of megamix types, it is just basic Oncidium care. So let's talk to that. Firstly then, they like bright indirect light, not too strong but not too dark. Otherwise you will just not get blooms and the plant will thrive but it will never flower. So that's the first thing. They can be grown indoors or outdoors, depends on your climate. Now, I have made the executive decision that our winters just drop a little too cold. Now, they won't die if I were to grow them outside, because our temperatures can drop to 1, 2, 3, 4, around 5-ish degrees Celsius, which is sort of 36 to 46 degrees Fahrenheit. So chilly, but not freezing. So as long as they're dry, they're not going to die, but my experience has been they just don't thrive. So what I have realized is that a minimum temperature of around 10 degrees centigrade, which is about 50 Fahrenheit, is fine. So if you could do that outside in a more sheltered sort of shade housey conservatory environment, fine. I don't. My area is exposed. It's just covered with the roof. So it's a little bit warmer than the ambient temperature, but it's not massively warmer. So executive decision, plant lovers, they all come indoors in winter, and a lot of them, if I have room, go outdoors in summer. So that's temperature and light. The next thing is watering, and it's really not that difficult. As with most orchids, you don't want to overwater them. Most orchids die from being overwatered, not underwatered. And as you can see, all of this type have fairly chunky pseudobulbs, so they can store a bit of water. So these types, you can go on holiday for a week or two and not worry about it. But what I do is, I'm not a drencher. I'm a little often kind of guy, but essentially you want the medium to almost dry out and then you water it reasonably well, but I don't drench it, rinse and repeat. It's hard to be prescriptive because it really depends on your ambient temperature. It depends how warm or humid your house is or what season it is. So you just got to kind of figure it out. And a great way is the weight of the pot, because the heavier it is, the more moisture is in the pot, the lighter it is, the less there is. So you'll get to weigh your children and understand what their optimum weight is. That's watering. Food, Now, these types of sort of oncidium-y megamixes can flower twice a year, which in my book means they kind of need constant feeding. There's kind of no downtime, because most of mine tend to flower in autumn and in very early spring, although this is obviously flowering in late winter. And in fact, others are. There is a Shari baby up there that I can smell, and the chocolate, sweet, spicy fragrance is amazing, but we'll do that another day. So fertilizing then, when I repot them, I always put some granules of a slow release fertilizer in the mix, and then every maybe 2 or 3 waterings, it depends, and I'm not religious about this, but I use a diluted seaweed-based fertilizer, and I give it a regular normal watering, but with that element in it. And then every spring, I will put a little topical application of that same amount of a granular slow release general fertilizer. Sometimes, if I remember, I have a nitrogen high soluble orchid food, which again, I dilute to about 1/8. I never use the recommended dose. I always dial it really down. Same with the seaweed fertilizer, less than they recommend, always, at least 1/8. If the orchid is in spike or the flowers are blooming, if I remember, I use this nitrogen high. It's a blooming specific fertilizer, but you know, the world won't end. They all seem to bloom if I forget, so there you go. And then potting. As with most orchids, don't overpot it. This is quite large because the root system was quite vigorous and healthy, and you can perhaps see that fabulous root that's just crawling across the top there? You kind of want the pot to fit the size of the root, not the size of the orchid. And most orchids like to be constrained because they're epiphytes or lithophytes generally, so they're used to small contained spaces. So overpotting can result in a plant that just kind of does nothing. I've had that. The minute you pot it down, it just bursts into life again. So curious, but anyway. And then this one particularly is just the most beautiful color. It's incredibly deep, I don't know, sort of russet, an autumny red. And the flowers have got these incredible touches of gold to the outside. The lip is a sort of a lighter, but still very deep burgundy red. The most beautiful flower. And I was really excited when I saw it. But plant lovers, this brings us to the second part, which is, how do you identify an orchid? So the first thing is then obviously looking at it without a flower spike, you can see, well, that kind of looks like one of those Oncidium alliance megamixes. It could be an Oncidium, it could be a Brassia, it could be anything really, but you kind of know the family that it's going to be in. Although you could be surprised, but so roughly you might have an idea. And interestingly, botanically, all plants, well, they used to be named by the flower. So plants were grouped according to the flower structure and type. Now it's largely about genetics and DNA. But in the day, it was all about flowering, which meant you couldn't ever name anything until you'd seen it flower. And a curious side note to that is bamboo. So a lot of bamboos were named in the late 19th century when they were first discovered by European botanists in China and Japan and the mountains of Southeast Asia. But some bamboos can take 60 years to flower. So a lot of bamboos had to be renamed once the flowers emerged because it was discovered that they were all completely different to the original names they had. Anyway, what I am rambling to is you can't really identify anything until it blooms. And what care do you give something when you don't know what it is? Well, you can guess that this is going to take general Oncidium care, which it has. Okay, so then your unknown ID cheapskate bought on sale orchid flowers and you're beside yourself. How do you find out what it is? So the first thing is looking at the flower, you can kind of assume, although it's tricky because there are so many of these mega hybrids, but it's an Oncidium type. So what I always do is I look at my favorite sellers and I look at their Oncidium alliance. So most online sellers group all of that type in one subsection, as it were. So you tend to see lots of images. So the first place I ever go to is the sellers that I buy things from, and I just have a look and see if I can recognize the flower. If that doesn't work, you then look at international sellers, some really good ones, and have a look. Same thing, go to their sort of Oncidium alliance section, have a look, see if you can find the flower. Now, in my case, I couldn't. So the next thing then is a general search. So the first thing is I searched Oncidium bloom. And then I tried all of those subtypes. So I tried Wilsonara bloom, Odontoglossum bloom, Colmanara bloom. And then you just have to go through and through and through. Once you find a match and it will have a name, then go and Google that name and see as many pictures of that bloom as you can to be really sure that it is the one that you've got. And with some orchid types though, like Cymbidiums, I think that is just about impossible, and perhaps Psychopedilums, because there are so many megamix hybrids. So with some types it's going to be impossible and you just have to roll with the fact that you will never know the name of your orchid. But I feel with these it's a little easier because they just seem to be more documented. Anyway, I was just really happy to find the name of it because I had actually been stalking, as one does, Wildcat orchids because the flowers are all quite rich, quite strong colors, and I really like that. So I'm just really thrilled that that's what it is. So there we are, plant lovers. There is a fragrance to this. It's not a strong fragrance. You have to get your nose into it, but it's quite beautiful, and it is a little bit like tuberose, a very delicate, toned down tuberose. It's really beautiful, very fresh but dark tuberose. And then of course I have potted it in terracotta because I'm a terracotta pot kind of guy. It's free draining, the water evaporates really quickly, it creates a little sort of humidifier for the orchid. It means that the roots don't tend to sit in soggy medium because it drains quite quickly. Does mean in summer though, it dries out faster, so you have to keep your eye on watering. And then in terms of the medium, it is just a regular intermediate orchid mix for me, which means medium-sized bark with a little bit of perlite, a little bit of charcoal, a sprinkling of shell grit, which I love. Well, I don't, but the orchids do. It's full of calcium. My two secret ingredients are always a few granules of slow-release fertilizer in the mix and mycorrhizal fungi. And I always use that, so you will know perhaps what it is. It is basically a powder that looks like ground ginger, and it promotes plant root growth. And what it does, it acts as the go-between between the nutrients that are in the soil, the medium, and the plant root. So it extracts the nutrients and makes them available for the plant. And it just really promotes sensational root growth. So whenever I receive something, I repot it and immediately include mycorrhizal fungi. And pretty quickly, like this one, you do start to see quite amazing new root growth. And when you come to repot something with mycorrhizal fungi, it's a real dense ball of roots. And the healthier root system a plant has, the healthier the plant will be. Well, so there we are. Mr. Coleman, you are forever in my memory, and we're not going to erase you by calling you, what are we calling you? Oncostele. No. Now, plant lovers, here's to embarrassing truth or dare. I literally do not remember what's in this box. Oh my goodness. There's more than one in here. I need a helpline. You might need to stage an intervention because I think this is just out of control. I blame COVID because why on earth would I be... Anyway, I'm not going to justify myself, plant lovers. I'm just going to open this orchid. I have no idea what they are, so I can't tell you what they might be, and I'm going to be really embarrassed and have not the slightest bit of care information. Now look at that tiny little thing. This is a dendrobium called, and I think it's Gjerdii, which sounds quite Icelandic, Gjerdii. Interesting little dendrobium. This is probably a folly. It is a warmer growing Dendrobium from Malaysia and the Philippines. So, but it is I think it does grow at altitude, but it has the most beautiful white, extraordinarily shaped flowers. So have a Google of that. But we'll see if I can make you, Gildii, thrive. Oh, there's 4 things. Oh heavens! So the previous Dendrobium, this is a species Dendrobium. So it is as it is found in the wild. Let's see what this is. You can see these are all quite small as well. So, you know, commitment, commitment, commitment. And what is this one? Oh, it's another Dendrobium. I was clearly on a Dendrobium binge. Dendrobium rhodostictum. Dendrobium rhodostictum. This has the most amazing flowers from the top of the cane, and it's a native of Bougainville Island and New Guinea, which you are screaming to yourself, that's tropical! But this is high altitude, so it is a cool to warm grower. So I'll be able to grow it indoors here. I might be able to grow it outdoors, but I won't risk that, I don't think. I'll definitely grow it indoors. Tiny little thing, bless it. But Dendrobiums are generally quite fast growers, so that will be interesting. Dendrobium rhodostictum. Watch this space. I hate all this nylon fluff. Okay, what's next? Isn't this hilarious? An unexpected unboxing video. Plant lovers, COVID Christmas. Let's see what we've got here. Ooh. Ah, this is I think this is a species Phalaenopsis. God, look how big it is, or small it is. Let's be glass half full. Look how big it is. I think though it is a small type. It is Phalaenopsis hydrochilla. I don't know if the H is silent. Anyway, there we are. Yes, so this is a species Phalaenopsis from that high mountainous area, the eastern Himalayas and around Vietnam and parts of China around there. It does grow to quite high altitude, so it's described as a cool to a hot grower. I find that amazing that a plant can be that adaptable. But anyway, if you Google it, the flowers are yellow with the most beautiful sort of this color actually dots throughout them. So quite beautiful, and I think perfect for my climate. But we're always going to have to watch this space, and it might be a while before this flowers, plant lovers. So go and put the kettle on. But the flowers are supposed to be very fragrant, so that will be an exciting project to watch. All right, what is the last? And is it the last? Oh dear, Matthew, what have you done? Anyway, look, they're all tiny. They won't take up any room because the pots will be so small. I honestly don't remember. Oh, this one's much bigger. Oh, let's have a look. Look at that. How fabulous. Oh, it's a bulbophyllum. I have no luck with them, plant lovers. Oh, look at it though. What a healthy little plant that is. Look at all those roots that are just crying out to get out of this nylon thread, which is microfiber that's going to kill us all. Anyway, I could go on a rant about microfiber, but I won't. That is beautiful. And it is a bulbophyllum tigridum. So this has the most amazing yellow flowers that are like a parasol, quite large, and it is endemic in parts of southern China, Taiwan and Hong Kong. It's described as cool to warm growing, which means I guess it ranges in elevation. Obviously the higher up it gets, the cooler the temperatures are. So once again, clearly it'll work for me here indoors, not outdoors, but I don't have much luck with bulbophyllum, so be interesting to see. This one though looks like the type of bulbophyllum that I might be able to grow, because it's a lithophyte, and I live for lithophytes because I love putting them in little rocky pots and giving them the comfort of their own rocky home. So let's see if I can manage to encourage this one to stay alive and to bloom. It's actually quite large, which to me might suggest it's actually at blooming size because it's a small plant. Interesting. Well, we'll watch that space and see how I go. There we are, plant lovers. Thank you very much for watching. Feel free to leave a comment. I am, remember, a rank amateur and know nothing, but I'll try and help if I can. I hope you have fun with any of your own non-ID IDing journeys. It's quite fun to try and figure out what on earth you've got and then how to look after it. This one though, Wildcat Black Cat, is wonderful, and I'm going to keep using the name Colmanara to remember Jeremiah Colman, because we don't want to forget him. He invented you. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I look forward to seeing you next week with a continuing orchid adventure, and until then, take care.